Imagine you're delving into a dungeon and come across a skull on a pedestal with something shiny inside of it. Without thinking, the barbarian sticks his arm in to grab the treasure. But, oh no! Who would have guessed? That's a trap. Triggering it, the skull clamps down with razor-sharp teeth and removes the barbarian's hand. This is just one example of lasting consequences, which is our topic tonight on Playing God. Xander, how many times have you encountered any kind of lasting consequences with your characters? And I'm not talking about death. I'm talking about something other than death that it dogs your character along, and I think you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, the most notable moment for a character that I've played in relation to lasting consequences has got to be becoming blind. So the story goes as such. Nick, running a campaign called Love
Legends of
Latier. I don't know
Latier,
if you've
yep.
heard it. If you
Yeah,
haven't heard of
a
it,
few times.
that means you haven't been listening to our podcast enough. So you need to go back, watch some of our episodes, listen to them, whatever. But we were traveling to a city called Moonlight Harbor because for some reason this level 3 party of adventurers decide they want to, look into the dragons sighting because we're smart. And we had this kind of little magical Wuji MacGuffin type deal called a Harvester Eye that you could use it to spy on others who had Harvester Eyes as well. Well, wouldn't you know it, but the dragon happened to have one. And my character, thinking he was completely above reproach and consequences, decided to spy on this dragon.
Let's pause for a
Uh,
second to mention that the entire party was like, "Don't do that, bro."
yeah,
And
the
you
whole party
proceeded
was
to
like that.
go scurry off into a bush and go do that.
Yeah, he did the exact opposite thing that everybody told him not to do. So, needless to say, dragon came swooping down from the mountain nearby, saying, "Give me the harvester eye. I'm gonna eat your face." And we're like, "Okay, yeah, totally. Here, have this thing." Uh, but in the process, my character and another player character were frozen solid, and the ramifications for that stupid decision that my character had made was to become blind, uh, which for fifth edition rules means uh, monsters have or enemies have advantage on attacks against you. You have disadvantage on attacks against them. You have disadvantage on all anything to deal with dexterity or movement, and you cannot make perception checks that are sight based. So, a really, really heavy
It's very
thing.
crippling. You also left out the part where after you gave it to him, you guys decided to effectively pull aggro by being like, "No, never mind. We want that back," and then chucking a spear,
Yeah,
which
that wasn't me
pissed him
though.
off.
That
It wasn't
that that
you. It
wasn't
wasn't
my
you.
that,
But
that wasn't me.
then you decided to try to get him, and that didn't work.
No, no, it did not. But that is an example of how consequences have kicked. Even I'm a rather experienced player. I've been playing for uh, almost almost 2 decades now, and my characters still make foolish decisions for
Well,
whatever reason
your
in character.
characters aren't metagaming. That's why it's important. Now, I don't
Yeah.
know about your other GMs, but when I do some kind of big lasting consequence, I try to make it important. It's not just something that comes out of nowhere. And uh, so with your great decision to fight a dragon, then you lost your sight when your eyes froze over. Have you had any GMs that had other lasting consequences? Like not even me, like somebody else, or if you yourself have implemented um, some kind of consequence onto the actions of a certain player.
Well, as far as other GMs having lasting consequences, see, this is one of those things that not a lot of GMs really implement, and it comes from a variety of different reasons. Most notably of which, I don't want to hinder my players from having fun, so consequences that might cause them trouble, even though they kind of deserve it, uh, isn't exactly fun for some DMs. Some DMs are real soft. Some DMs are more hard about it. But it's not as common as you think it would be. Uh, that being said, I have implemented very serious lasting consequences. But mine usually end with, in this particular instance, it ended in a player character death, even though it wasn't supposed to be that way.
What was the consequence? Because if like obviously these are crippling things, so they could
Yes.
lead eventually to death. Like if you hadn't magically cured your blindness, then after like what 20 sessions or something, like you were in very serious peril through a majority of that time.
Oh, yes, yes, absolutely. One of the things that had happened to one of my players, they had decided they were all getting together, and they had to deal with this kind of young, real cocky, real kind of squishy young dragon. Not even adult, just young. And in dealing with this dragon, the Dragonborn character had a bit of a issue regarding the killing of this dragon. He felt like it was unjust, and the it wasn't justified that the characters had to do that. And so, having an emotional problem, the character decided to kind of run off on his own. Like, I'm running back to the hotel. I'm gonna go do my own thing. Fuck it, I don't care. And my response to that as GM
Wait, a
is to,
hotel? What, did they go to the Quality Inn or some shit like that?
well, no, it wasn't a quality inn. In fact, it was a piece of shit inn. But whatever. uh, they, the player character decided to go off on his own, and I'm one of those GMs that I will implement lasting consequences if it's a real big thing, and if it's important for the story. Uh, in this instance, I sent a small band of just brutes to attack him, at which he was felled in battle, um, and the character had the capacity. In fact, one of the other players had the ability to revive him uh, using a spell that they had actually just gotten. But the player didn't want to revive the character. My plans at that moment were to have a dismemberment, which is one of the topics we're going to cover tonight. But in retrospect, like it didn't have the intended consequence, but my focus was to cause some kind of issue like that. Now, there are spells to fix things like dismemberment and
Right, right,
curses,
right.
all
We
those
all
things.
know about the spells. We're talking about how to actually do it. So what did you end up doing to this player?
Well, the player ended up getting his tail handed to him by this kind of gang of
Wait,
uh,
literally, he's a dragonborn.
no, not literally, figuratively. He got beat to a bloody pulp. He was healed several times by the other players who didn't want to get involved but didn't want to see him die. Trouble was when he did actually die, and the other players decided to get involved, and they actually took care of the problem and everything. The character was basically set before the gods that exist within the world that I run, and he decided to just stay instead of being revived when the pull came back. So the consequences were initially thought up to be okay, you ran off by yourself. That was a real boneheaded move. Your character is going to lose his left arm. It's a really big thing, but it can be fixed. It can be something that will be fine in the end. But he decided not to come back, so it really didn't help in the long run. But it was one of the examples where it could have been a perfect opportunity for lasting consequences to be uh, administered for that. But
Right.
there's nothing more lasting than a character death. So
Yeah,
I
but
suppose
yeah,
that's also
that's
true.
not really what we're talking about tonight. This is different. But you did bring up a good point earlier that I thought was good, and that is when GMs are avoid doing that because a lot of times you're right. A lot of GMs just won't put any kind of like either permanent result for some bad decision, or they softball it. Now, that's totally up to you as a GM, but uh, I find that it's brings a bit more to the table when you follow like the logical outcomes of certain actions. Um, D&D specifically isn't really the system for like, oh, you've been hit for 30 damage, you lose an arm. I mean, you could play it that way, but that's really not what it's for. There are some specific systems like, was it Riddle of Steel that is supposed to be more like that, where it's kind of like a more realistic
Yeah,
medieval fighting thing. Uh,
yeah,
but when I implement something like this, it's always because of a like role play decision or something along those lines, rather than just you took an assload of damage. Uh, like in your instance, even though you did take an assload of damage, it wasn't because you were just in a fight. It was because you made a bad choice and initiated something you had no right to initiate.
yeah, totally. Kenton was initially known as a complete bonehead. But I mean, you grow up in a palace effectively your whole life. You're gonna kind of have some problems, some hangups. So,
But
yeah,
that wasn't even the first time. Yeah, that wasn't even the first time in the Legends of Latir that I did something like that. Nor was it going to be the last. So that same paladin who decided to initiate the spearing blow to the dragon that got pissed off, um, he had lycanthropy for a good while after you guys discovered that halfling who had contracted the lycanthropy of being a werewolf, and the paladin got bit, and this was early on before like anybody's immune to this kind of thing, and
yeah,
so he didn't even know he had it for a long time because something that I do when it comes to these things, but some GMs don't, is I usually will roll in secret for like your Constitution save or whatever
hmm
save or effect that you need to roll out is behind the screen because I don't know about you, but if something bites me, I can't feel the microbes like, oh no, they're spreading, oh, I'm gonna get sick.
yeah. Another instance of that exact kind of thing. Uh, not attempting to kill a werewolf with a campfire, which we did, by the way. It was
Well, yeah, that ended with a Randy Savage elbow drop and then like a pile driver into a campfire, which was awesome.
absolutely. No, one of my characters were Kenton, and some of the other characters were fighting a D&D monster called Salads or Salade, however
Oh,
you
that was
decide to
also a
pronounce
fun
it.
one. I think it's
Yeah,
just Slod.
yeah, I think it's just Salad. But Kenton had contracted basically this tiny parasite
So
that if
it's
he was just a guy, it'd
the
kill him.
the red slot, I think, is the one that gives it to you
Yeah,
from
yeah.
just a melee attack. And when I hit you with that, you guys didn't know what they were, so I wasn't even gonna give you any hints. And you didn't bother researching them after that either. So I rolled for your thing in the background and I was like, oh shit. This will be fun in play in about, I think the gestation time was like 3 months or so.
Yeah, it was three
And
months. We had
so
no idea. And like we're doing downtime stuff back in Elrin and he basically gives birth to this little monster creature thing that the the palace cleric, the Parafith cleric has to
I
kind of
I didn't forget about that guy either.
yeah,
No,
no.
it was a whole thing. You had to go like get into surgery because it was actually going to kill you if it
Yeah.
managed to chest burster its way out of you. But with some quick surgery and a bunch of healing magic, you
Yeah.
extracted it safely and then wanted to kill it. Reasonable, but it
Yeah.
wasn't.
No. But so yeah, it's one of those instances where like taking into account the small choices and the small things, uh, it probably wouldn't have actually like in a story sense, it gave a sense of tension and brought a real sense of danger and like there's things that we deal with on a regular basis that the average Joe just there's no way they could handle this. Uh, but Kenton could have died there in the middle of his home from something that he'd fought months prior
Hmm.
and didn't do anything about trying to figure out what was going on with it. Now,
Well,
to
you
be
didn't know there was
fair,
anything that was going on with it, so it was a
yeah,
surprise.
yeah, to be fair, there's no reason for him to suspect, but now he does. So if they ever see Slot, just be like,
Every
"All right,
every
don't let him
every
touch
time he
you."
gets hit nowadays, he wonders, "Am I pregnant with an extra dimensional monster?"
I am pregnant with an extra dimensional monster. Damn it! I knew I shouldn't have
Not
let that dog
again.
fight. Not again. Not again. Ah!
Yep. So between that kind of thing, slods, lycanthropy, dismemberment, big things. I've had a character once in a Deadlands game that we were doing a World War One kind of specialized unit that was going to basically find some spooky shit. You know, kind of like World of Darkness, where it exists
Yeah.
but nobody knows about it. We
Hmm.
were effectively playing like hunters in World War One, except using the Deadland system.
Hmm.
And as part of this, we found like this cult where this basically a straight up mage was opening up a portal somewhere. And of course, being World War One, his a couple of his guards, which were cleaning up the place, and I put cleaning in quotes because they were using flamethrowers to burn evidence, uh, happened to turn one of those flamethrowers at our team when we engaged them. At the end of
That
that,
sounds terrifying.
it was. My character barely made it out alive. I lost like the entire left arm was just burned away, or was it the right arm? I can't remember. It's one of my arms that was important, and so I've had to spend the rest of the game with no arm. And being a soldier in World War One, because I didn't quit. That wasn't the quitting point. That was the figure like carry a one-handed pistol or like something that I could wield like that, and like learn how to role play so that way it could live with that consequence. Because there's no way you're getting that back, not in freaking World War One.
No. And definitely not without like magic and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, we don't
Uh,
have access to magic because we're just regular old soldiers.
Regular guys. Yeah. Another instance of lasting consequences. This is actually pretty recent. Now you guys all know my wife, Bobby. She runs a game every Sunday, and it's a fantastic game. It's really fun. It's an Underdark based campaign, but right now we're trudging through the Beastlands. And in order to get home, we had to find a tuning fork attuned to the material plane. If you don't know what those things are, look in the DMG, stuff like that. You should have the books by now if you're following what we're telling you. Um, but we had to find a fork. Now, one of the things that we had to deal with was the fact that these things are pretty rare. So the only way we're going to get one is by going and making a deal with a creature, a hell creature. I can't remember what it was called, but I think it was a Marilith. Um, but we basically had to sign contracts that caused us some troubles. And the contracts go all the way from you if you roll a 20, the Marilith can make it not happen, but it's a one instance kind of use of your quote unquote luck, all the way down to the Marilith gets your soul. So the consequences that my character, in order to get this tuning fork to get himself and the rest of his party home, was to sign away his luck, and it's been kicking his ass the entire time. And this is one of those things where the consequences are very real. They're right there in his face every single time. Things that he would be able to do blindfolded with his hands behind his back a few days prior are difficult and becoming an issue. So how he handles dealing with that going forward is one of those things you have to kind of role play out and figure out as a character. But that's the most recent example, I think, of lasting consequences for one of my characters.
All right, all right. Oh yeah, I never told you about this. I think I was actually saving it for this podcast. Um, you know how recently you guys went into the Underdark in my game? I actually had
Yeah.
something set up right near that entrance that could have really messed you up, but you avoided it completely because you found the real path out of there. You remember when you opened up that vault door and then you found that skull in the engraved into the wall,
Oh
like kind
yeah.
of a statue thing? Well, if you hadn't noticed the secret hallway, which Meepo did, um, then that was actually a trap. And what was going to end up happening was there was like these levers in there, which if you stuck your hand in, grabbed the lever, pulled it, that's just you activating the trap, which slices your hand off. And
Oh shit.
yeah, and it then
I,
it
I
then it
don't think.
opens the other side of the other eye, which has a lever. And when you reach in there and pull that, it does the same thing because the Underdark's a piece of shit. And
Because the Underdark's a
but
piece
you
of
guys
shit.
avoided
I don't
that
think.
entirely.
I don't think Mara can actually regenerate limbs yet. I don't think.
No, that's why it would have been one of these lasting consequences.
Oh
Uh,
man, that would have been terrible. I'm so glad Meepo found that freaking uh thing then, because we'd have got our arms chopped off,
yeah,
especially Ken, because that would have been the thing. It's like, oh well, I'm gonna reach into this thing's mouth, grab this lever. Oh, there goes my right arm.
yeah, it was
Well,
gonna.
open
It,
up
it was
this
meant to
lever. Oh
serve as
shit.
like an initial like you need to pay attention of what's going on in the Underdark because it is not a happy place and anything could be set up to intentionally harm you. And
Yeah,
but I mean, you guys learned that already anyway from other
yeah,
shit. But um,
yeah. Underdark's scary.
yeah, well, like let's start talking about implementing all this stuff. Like, well, what one more physical kind of ailment that I want to cover is diseases. Now, I wanted to
Ooh,
save this one for
diseases.
last out of all this because of the grander potential for the role playing the world as a whole. So if you're a GM, you have like some disease. You can make it up, or you could use one in the book, or it could be transmitted by a monster, whatever. Then if somebody contracts that, then how contagious is this disease? Is it something that will kill you really fast, or is it something that works it out over time? And if you have this disease and you come in contact with the populace, how quickly do you become patient zero in a like kingdom-wide or city-wide epidemic that you caused because you decided that you were going to go hang out at the tavern after um, successfully getting like breathing in all of the gross stuff from that dungeon you just delved into.
Hmm. Yeah, I think actually Kenton's backstory game. This is a while ago, like almost 2 years we've been playing this game. But in Kenton's backstory game, see, Kenton's backstory is to basically put it as gently and as nutshell as possible. His parents were shoemakers, and in the poorer part of town, unbeknownst to both the city guard and the people who, the ruling class, the 12 council seat members, or 13, or however many there are, I can't remember. Um, there was an Odiug in the sewers, and it was making people sick and killing people. And my parents were actually victims of this Odiug, killing a lot of people and
No,
creating this
yes, it was
disease.
also had a plague that was kind of central to that part of the city because it was very territorial and didn't like go farther, and it was a poorer part of town, so the people kind of stuck to their cliques, I guess.
Yeah, but one of the things that we had to do. Now, my character's parents had contracted this disease and died, uh, shortly after he was born. So it had been going on for 18 years when he actually went into the sewer himself and killed this thing with his party. But the disease was a very real problem, and
And something you
plagued
could
that
have
part of the city for a while. Yeah,
contracted.
it was totally something we could have, gotten the rest of the
And
people in
but
the
the bigger
12th
thing
sector.
about all this is you can use these kind of ailments to actually basically present the quest to hype up a monster because for a good portion of those early missions you didn't know it was an ODU. It was just a weird disease that showed up and then you started researching as like why is it localized? Why isn't it spreading out like to the bigger parts of the city? And then you track like the causes coming from the sewers. Let's find out why. And then you learned about it. You prepped for the ODU. You didn't know exactly what you were looking for, but you knew it was coming from a creature. And you like prepped your gear. You had your plans with your party members, and then you went in and you took care of the issue without me having to say, let's see, the king approaches you and he wants you to go into the sewer to stop this ODU from spreading its disease. Like there's a whole
Yeah,
mystery behind it.
yeah. There's I think part of the reason is Kenton kind of had a personal stake in it because it was a question that he was asked when he was still a kid about that exact problem. So it kind of was the thing that drew him in. So that tip for you budding dungeon masters out there: if you want to make a player character invested in the story, make it a part of their backstory. If you do that, they're gonna go hunting for the stuff themselves. You just gotta sit back and watch. It's a good way to go about getting things started. Uh, bravo, Nick. Obviously, because it was really good. Um, with the implementing of diseases, uh, specifically, in my experience, I haven't put a lot of diseases out there, um, but it's one of those things that kind of I've held in the back of my mind, like, yeah, I could totally screw the entire party over with this. I never really have, and I think that goes back to every DM has their thing and their style, and your style might not include things like that, and that's okay. You don't have to have like diseases being rampant through your
Well,
world and stuff like that.
it's also depends on the group as well, because if you have a bunch of like uh high fantasy adventurers that have like magic weapons and all this stuff, and like the players and you want to like go after like big things monster hunter style, then
Oh yeah,
you might not want to have these kind of uh like diseases or um even like lycanthropy in some instances, unless you're specifically hunting like a werewolf or some crap like that, because it's just not what the game is about. And depending on the players, and I've seen this a few times in games, and it's when a player has something happen to their character, and I think this might be why GMs kind of shy away from lasting consequences. Um, they kind of get they kind of get a little butthurt about it, and
yeah,
I've actually seen people just straight up like retire or change characters because of that. And like especially in fantasy settings, there's usually a lot of room for being able to repair the damage and like grow as a role player and just like see how the challenge you can actually take on this challenge by using like your maybe not like metagaming out of game, but like kind of out of game knowledge with it's like okay, let's see. I'm gonna start describing everything like as if we'll go back to the lost an arm example. If I only have one arm, then let's see how would I function in the world, and just kind of see how you can apply that to your character because they would no doubt be trying to think of those same things.
yeah, and that is an opportunity for great role play. It's a place and a platform that if you're, if even if you're an inexperienced player, those kinds of things add so much to a character. Like, it's all well and good that a character can do, 2d6 fire damage with their, mythical great sword, and they're fighters and really good, but when what a role player their bread and butter are the flaws. It's the things about the character that's not quite normal, or it's not quite right, or
Which
it's
is why so
something to deal.
many systems put in something like D&D now specifically has a spot on your character sheet for flaws.
Yeah.
Shadowrun has negative qualities.
Yep.
Um, Deadlands has hindrances, or Savage Worlds as a more encompassing system. They have hindrances, and like the list goes on.
Yeah. So in order to kind of combat that kind of butthurt feeling, because as a GM, your responsibility to your players is to make sure that everybody's having fun. If you're not having fun, they aren't either. And if they're not having fun, there's probably an issue. But when implementing these kinds of things, a lot of the times it causes those ill feelings. It can be with another player, it can be with the DM himself or herself, and that kind of harkens back to knowing your players and knowing this is not a high fantasy game. There's going to be consequences. Are
I
you
mean,
okay with that?
if you just
You
straight
know,
up prep people, like that's usually good enough. Even if you're playing with randos, a lot of times
yeah,
when I've seen rando groups come together, then it's they most like experienced role players come in with like what I know bad things are going to happen. Uh, how can I deal with these bad things? Most people are just assuming death, but everyone else like has this idea that there could be something like this that goes on. Like
yeah,
if you are going after a werewolf, then you know that there is a certain degree that you could get lycanthropy. And if you don't want to take that risk, then what you could do is you could straight up just like as a party be like, we don't want to deal with that. We can't handle this kind of thing. And then they might fuck off and do something else. And then that would mean at that point that the werewolf is now just its own thing that is now could be problematic still to the civilization around it. And
so
if
lasting
that's
consequences.
right, and right, if the if like the town head was like hired these adventurers to go take care of that, and they come back and they're like, no way, we're not doing that, then that could in and of itself be a lasting consequence, because if they do fuck off and this continues to be a problem, then the the people of the town would know that the adventurers were supposed to handle this, that they said they would originally, and then they chickened out. And so there might be this rumor that spreads across the land where it's like, oh, you're Ragnar the Coward. I've heard of you from this town in the mountains. And then next thing you know, the PCs are like getting dogged by this bad rumor, which isn't quite a rumor. It's actually a fact. They did just abandon the people they promised they would help.
Yeah, it's totally true. Those kinds of things actually happen more often than you think they would.
But like actual rumors, they that could like escalate as well. It's just like, hey, I heard
Hmm.
you've run away from every fight you've ever come into, and then that's a social consequence. That's
Ah,
that
yeah.
might not be something that directly harms the character like getting limbs lost and all that other stuff, but it would definitely hurt them in the long run. Like if they go to a different town where a traveling merchant who was there when they originally fucked off um, got to that place and like, yeah, I heard these talking to the people at the tavern, like, yeah, I heard these guys while I was in this town, like, promised they'd help with this problem, but then they just turned coward and ran away, and then those same people show up and it's like, hey, we're looking for work. Then the townspeople are like, I don't know if we can trust you. We're gonna wait for somebody who will actually back up their word.
Yeah, so screw you, dude. Bye. Yeah. There's there's not a lot of places where I've personally had to deal with the like bad rumors, or at least good rumors, totally, because the Legends of Latir live on as coffee mugs and T-shirts and shit. Apparently, uh, and just last game, Kenton signed a effectively a poster of himself and everybody else.
You've
But
had to deal with that
uh,
before.
oh yeah,
I'll use Kenton as an example even. Um, he is it's not really all that bad, but you are known throughout many parts of the world as very long-winded.
oh yes, 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 he is. But that's That's because he is.
I mean, that's
For real.
that's a minor consequence. That's just a part of his character, and that's fine. Like it
Yeah.
it separates him from other people and all that, but that's still something that like people kind of give you like trash talk you about. It's like, oh, this guy, he's gonna come in. Let's see how long he's gonna talk for.
Yep. Oh, it's Kenton Devereaux. Ah, this dude. Man,
Well, if
we're
I
might as
wanted
well
to
go
sign
like
up
go
for
get
a
a snack.
lecture, then I would have gone to the local library.
That needs to be a thing. Like Kenton needs to give a lecture, and like all the other players need to fall asleep on him. Like even Mara falls asleep. So, sweetie, I'm sorry, I love you, but God, you talk too much. Uh, but yeah, social consequences can be just as fun and rewarding as both a player and a GM as some of the physical stuff. So besides Kenton being getting dogged for being dude talking what too much, are there any experiences you've got from that kind of social
Like
consequences stuff?
social consequences. Uh, let me. Oh yeah, here we go. So let me tell you probably again about the Stars Without Number character Neithri Laran, who started out as basically the Faye Valentine from Cowboy Bebop of the party. She had her own ship, was kind of an outlaw, was doing jobs and that kind of thing. But as the story went on, she became interested in helping out an AI, like a full AI that was unshackled, think Skynet, and believing that this AI would actually turn out to be used for the or would choose to be for the good of the sector of this particular galaxy. And that doesn't jive too well with galactic authority. So, even though I started out as just a regular low-end criminal, I ended up the second most wanted person in the entire sector.
That's got to be fun to kind
We
of.
we
It's like,
walked.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'm
Oh,
totally.
I had to plan that out. We went through a spaceport once, and before I knew how bad like the response would be, and it was like if I was detected, they would lock down the entire spaceport, pull ships back from orbit that have already launched, and like call every government in like this planetary alliance.
Oh Jesus, really?
That was the second they detected me. Yeah, they would come in armed to the teeth because I was by this time I was very dangerous. I could effectively control whatever I wanted telekinetically and also teleport. So lockdown wasn't too much of a big deal in some regards to me because I could just leave. But
You're like,
uh,
I'm done with this.
but even though I
Bye.
could do that, I didn't want them getting on my tail because at that point in the story, we had just gotten out of this big conflict, and we're like, we need to lay low. So that's what we were doing. I was laying low along with the rest of the party, laying the lowest, one might say. And then I found out the response from a single spaceport and a backwater planet. What happens if I go through it?
Yeah, well, that's a lasting consequences like a motherfucker.
Oh
Jesus.
yeah, yeah. That's an impact on the entire setting. Uh, which is that's something that not all consequences have to be bad. It's just a result in a lot of ways. You
Hmm.
actually mentioned earlier with the Legends of Latir being popular in some areas. It's like that's a consequence. You've done
Yeah,
good deeds throughout the entirety of the campaign. You've made yourselves known, and apparently some guy has or merchants guild or something that you don't know because you didn't find out has apparently decided to cash in on that popularity.
to trademark. Okay, so story time. Last Halloween, we had every year we have a Halloween episode, a Christmas episode, for Nick's
Oh, I
game,
do. I will always do holiday themed episodes.
and it's great. It's a lot of fun. We get to we get to just cut loose a little bit. It's the game, it's the campaign, but there's a little bit of uh, room to just kind of slack and have some fun. But so it's our Halloween episode, and we end up kind of shanghaied into this small town that's celebrating Halloween. And it ended with us fighting some stuff, and once again the day, thanks to friendship or what the fuck
Hmm.
ever it is we were doing.
That was
But
at the end. Like at
we
the
we were
beginning of this is the important part.
yeah, but we were at a festival, and this festival has people walking around dressed up in costumes as our characters. And my character comes up to this kind of punch thing, and now he's a monk, a level like what was it, 11 at the
You
time,
were you were
monk.
like 10 or 11. It was pretty high.
So needless to say, this dude could punch a commoner one time and then
You
just
yeah,
flat
I
out
mean
die.
you've killed large monsters that would be impossible for the average person to take on.
Yeah. So the crazy thing is like this kid that's running this little
Oh yeah,
booth.
let's set the scene. He got this booth. He's operating. He's this bored teenager. He doesn't want to be here, but he's getting money for it. And then you come up and you're like, I am that guy. Like I am Ken Devereaux, and he's like, uh-huh. And
Yeah,
then you're like, I'm
right.
gonna prove it. And the best part of this whole thing was when you went to go hit the target, you rolled a nat one and completely missed, like grazed it at best. And the kid was like, "Yeah, see, I knew it."
Yeah, see, totally knew it.
And you got so mad.
Kitten just got so fucking pissed. He's like, you know what? Fine. He tries again, spends a key point, and actually does flurry of blows on this fucking carnival thing, and it doesn't. He doesn't win. It's like you drop the hammer thing, the bell rings. No,
No,
it's you. He kicked this thing so hard it broke it, and I don't mean like, oh, it's not going to work anymore. Like snapped the support
the whole
structure in half
mechanism
and
was annihilated
just completely obliterated this thing.
because
He's like, oh fuck it,
the carnival
bam.
contraption was meant for a level 0 commoner to play with, not a level 10 monk who's defeated demon patrons.
Yeah, literally killed a demon with his bare hands. Fucking takes on this carnival thing, and he just annihilated it. And the great part about that is, uh, other characters were walking around, and there's like our little kobold played by Bobby. There's what was it, like a gravy boat or something like that, some little
Yeah.
trinket thing.
I
But it
mean,
was a
Meepo
Meepo.
likes to eat, so I gave him something to swim in effectively.
Yeah.
But everybody in that whole area was like dressed as you guys. Not everybody, but enough so that there was like some sitcom level like miscommunication and
So our barbarian goes chasing down someone dressed as our bard, horribly, badly dressed
I made him
as
roll
our bard.
perception just to see if he would notice, and he
And
rolled
he
really
rolled like
low.
a 3. It was like crazy low. He's like, Mara, what are you doing? And she turns around. Excuse me? Do I know
Oh no,
you?
hold on.
Look,
You
where's
don't
Kenton?
even you didn't even mention the part where he talked to her for a solid 2 minutes, and then he finally said, "All right, hey, you want to get out of here?" And that lady turned and was like, "Well, you're very forward." And then he looks down and he's like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah, he had no idea he was talking to the wrong one. It was great. But yeah, that is to to segue back. That is an example of lasting consequence. It doesn't always got to be bad. In fact, lasting consequences being a good thing are great places for a low impact episode for your game. Like if it's you want to plan something for a holiday, or it's a character's birthday, or
Or
uh you know
it's even just a great reward on non-special occasions
mm,
because when players can see how they've impacted everything, how their characters have transformed the setting that they are in pretty much any degree, then that's a satisfying experience.
oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
like with my second most wanted person in the galaxy, like knowing that even though that was gonna be really hard to overcome, like knowing that that's how important my character has become was like very satisfying to me.
Oh yeah. in Nick's game, Kenton and Mara, being characters from like game 1 and game 5, have had such a large impact on the world that they go places and people just know who they are already. They don't have to explain themselves. They don't have to try and convince someone that they're there to help. People already know that they're there to help, and it's slowly gained traction to the point where people who shouldn't know who they are already do. Like kids from a random village in a country you've never been to recognize you on sight because of a painting that was done, a couple of years ago at a thing that they did outside their country in another country you've also never been to. So it's one of the most satisfying moments, like to walk into a village as your character and the villagers be like, "Oh, look, it's that guy. It's that guy. He's here to help us. He's here to save us." And you're like,
Hmm.
"Oh shit.
Then even if they don't know
Hell
you on
yeah."
sight, like something cool that happened in the Deadlands Hell on Earth game, which is the post-apocalyptic one. Um, my character, who's just like this kind of wandering, uh, he kind of just helps people out as much as possible. He like tries to help the underdogs and you know, all that
So
good
you're
stuff.
Vash the Stampede.
Yeah, sort of, except with way more radiation magic. Uh, it got to the point where people may not recognize me on sight because he's an interesting looking dude. But like once he kind of introduces himself, and I speak with like the hey, my name's Stephen Chang, and like when people hear that, then they're go like, shit, this guy is he. If he's here, then we don't have to worry anymore. Whatever's going on, he's gonna be able to take care of this. And I'm always
Yeah,
like, I really hope so, because
yeah.
that might
Like,
not be the case.
yeah, it might not work, but we'll try. But yeah, as a GM, one of the things that implementing those that impact on the world is really important for your players, because at the end of the day, at the end of the game, at the end of the session, and even at the end of the campaign, you want your players to feel like the choices that they made mattered, and that it changed the way the world worked, and it changed things for the better in most cases, or the worse if you're running an evil campaign. That's topic for another day though. Uh, it's good to reward players for unique things about their characters. Like for example, think of an anime. I can think of two right now that if I described this to you, you instantly know what I'm talking about if you have any experience with anime. Golden hair spiked up, energy crackling around them, uh, guy with a lot of muscles. You think, Goku or
Hey, you could
Vegeta.
have given me that real as a real shot. I was thinking the Saiyans,
Yeah, yeah.
because by
You
now, like
recognize them.
every Saiyan can do that. So,
Yeah, but
but I
you
would think Goku
recognize that.
originally. What's your other example?
The other
Give me a
example
shot.
is okay. So here's a good one. Guy with white hair and dog ears in a red kimono.
Red-haired dog ears and a kimono.
Red kimono, white hair, and dog ears. Carries a real big fucking sword.
Apparently, I fail. I don't know what you're talking about.
Dude, Inuyasha.
Oh, that guy, dude! I haven't
Yeah.
seen that show since the '90s.
Oh, well, okay, so I guess that dates me, but still, you get the point. If you see a poster with Inuyasha on it, you know who the guy is. You know what he
Okay,
stands
yeah,
for.
yeah. If I
You know,
see him, yeah,
yeah.
obviously that'd be
You
instantaneous.
recognize characters from TV shows. You recognize characters from all over, and that's because your characters have something. Those characters have something unique about them. It's a unique look. It's a unique dress. Like Kenton, he wears the fancy pants.
That's
They're
right.
bright gold hammer pants.
Well, it's just
So
also when we had the episode about making a cool NPC. It's like that's something you could do as a GM to really just like add that finishing touch, or like a little bit of detail, so you don't even have to really describe the rest of the character. You can just be like
hey guys, what's up?
plaid shirt.
Yep, that's Willis Stacks. Instantly
Hello.
recognize that's Solbert.
Yep. See, I only had to
It
do
worked.
one thing, and then it's it.
Yeah. So kind of going back to kind of social consequences and impact on the world for your characters and your players, if they have a thing that is unique about their character, like Kenton wears the fancy pants and the blindfold, even though he doesn't need to anymore. Uh, People recognize that about them. So if they see a guy who's wearing a blindfold, that's Kenton Devereaux. It's got to be, because who else walks around with a blindfold on? Oh, he just hit a wall. That might not
It
actually
might not
be
actually be him.
him, but it's a good standard to kind of look at and reward your character, your players for making those choices and having something unique about their character, and that's a good way to create social consequences in a good way that create a lasting impression for your players, because every tiny thing that you give as a GM to your players that is really cool and it's that good moment and it's, you know, they feel satisfied that they've done something great. It's not just a combat. It could be they convinced an enemy to not fight anymore and maybe they gained an ally. And in those moments, that's where a player character shines. And giving into that and making those impactful moments resound with the rest of your game are probably the most important part of a role-playing game. I think almost in its entirety. Like, those are the things that you want there, even if none of the other things are there. It shouldn't be about the rules. It shouldn't be about the dice rolling and stuff like those things are important, granted. But the moment where the player character does something impactful and they are reciprocated for that work and that time and that effort and that cleverness, uh, those are the moments that player characters and the players remember throughout time. It's the memorable moments, and those lasting impressions and those lasting consequences for your game are the things that they're going to remember. So, implementing these things in both a negative and a positive light are paramount as a GM. So,
And if,
yeah.
as a player, you want to try to do this yourself as well,
Oh
even
yes.
even if you aren't the GM, you can put stuff on your character sheet. You could put like little descriptions of how you look or act, and you could
Hmm.
play those up. And even if you do end up having one of the bad consequences, then you can play that up. You can you could even twist it to use it for your advantage. Um, if you have a character who loses a leg and you need to infiltrate some kind of gathering of some sort, then you could use that to your advantage and be like, look, there's no way I could harm you. I have one leg, I'm in a wheelchair. You maybe not don't know that I can cast fireball and blow up the entire building, but that might give you a better chance to let you in or something.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
It's
just work it into the story.
yeah. It's a really good moment for both players and GMs to kind of to have something fun to play with. So if your players are having issues regarding dealing with lasting consequences, uh, they might not be the players you want to have around, at least not for that particular campaign. You might want to go something a little more like high energy, lots of combat, because there's players out there. There's nothing wrong with that. But
And also be
yeah.
sure that you know what you are evaluate yourself on this topic. Like,
Oh
if
yes,
you are a
absolutely.
player, what are you cool with? What do you want to see? Are you cool with, uh, getting crippled or diseased or cursed by some genie or whatever? Then figure that out, and you can also like straight up talk to the GM when you start this game, or when you're thinking about joining even. Like, you can ask just, hey, is this a possibility? How much of a possibility might this be? And so on and so forth. And that's about all we have until next time on Playing God.